I guess the reason why I was interested in Leonora, which is a northern goldfields town about 10 hours northeast of Perth, was because there's a detention centre there which the community and the government call an APOD, which is an alternative place of detention because they have families there with children. So we're not allowed to have children in detention centres in Australia, so hence the term APOD. And that was really the thing that I thought that I could really latch onto, but at the same time I was still really open to the idea that other things could happen. So through some contacts with the Immigration Department, I arranged to start a weekly drawing class in the detention centre. And it was really interesting because I had the whole process of being in Leonora challenged all my expectations. And what I quickly realised was that because the detention centre was such a hot potato in kind of federal politics, that so much money and support was being kind of pushed into this small little mining community through the detention centre. You know, the kids in the detention centre had these beautiful new playgrounds, they had so much staff, they had all these activities. And as the weeks went on, what I noticed was this incredible disparity between what was happening in the detention centre and the support that the actual Leonora community was getting. And I still feel uncomfortable saying that, but that was, I guess, my experience. And so what ended up happening over time is that I kind of decided to just keep having conversations with people. So I would get up in the morning and I would just walk around and knock on people's doors and talk to people. And this went on pretty much for the whole sort of 4 months that I was going up and back there. And my interest in the detention centre waned. And I guess it sort of stuck with me one morning when I had just flown in. I was on a really early morning flight and it was about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was wandering around the streets and I heard this blood-curdling screaming, and I kind of knew that it was a mother's scream. And it turned out that this woman's son had killed himself that morning by stabbing himself in the chest with a broken bottle. And in fact, the Aboriginal community in Leonora is fantastic. But what I realised was that this poor kid was getting access to a mental health worker that was flying in once a month for half a day. And it really brought it home to me, you know, that this is actually where I need to be putting my energy. This is where I can help. This is where, you know, I need to be focusing on. Hang on, just let me get this happening. So this is in the detention centre. So this will just kind of flick through, hopefully. And will it just flick through? Okay. Yeah, and anyway, so from that point in time, I started working with the Wongatha community up there and thinking about ways that I could not so much use my skills as an artist, but use my skills as a networker to assist them in making kind of cultural activities happen and to give people a sense of purpose. And I began a discussion with some really wonderful people up there called Cato and Diva Muir, who were local Wongatha elders, well Cato is, and also with other people. And we got talking with BHP, and BHP finally agreed to give us an initial $20,000 to start running artist workshops in the community. So if you can see this storefront here with the red, this was MEDAC, which is you sort of find in every remote town. It's a place where Centrelink facilitate really stupid workshops like I don't know, training shops to become a trainer for Aboriginal people that are struggling with issues like literacy, you know, and a whole range of other people. You know, I mean, it was really offensive. And actually what was not happening and what the community wanted to happen was ways to connect back to culture that had some kind of meaningful relationship with a white economy. So initially we got Nolde cells up into Leonora to do basket making workshops. We've since had book writing and storytelling workshops up there, and this is ongoing. And BHP are really happy because it's keeping people engaged. The white community are happy because they're seeing the Aboriginal community doing stuff, and there's kind of important links being made to other aspects of the community that were otherwise, I guess, disassociated. So I did a lot of work with the youth centre while I was there. I did a lot of work with the local shire. This is my kids up on Mount Leonora. And what started to happen is that the white community that had never engaged with the Aboriginal community started to go into shops and places and parts of the town that they had never been into before. And, you know, this is still ongoing. I don't suggest for a minute that I went up there for 4 months and fixed it, but what I became very aware of was that I didn't want to go into the community for 4 months and do something and then leave, and nothing was left there after that point. So I still am engaged with helping BHP find ways to put their money back into the community and to kind of mediating a discussion between the Shire and the Aboriginal community up there. And so these things, I guess, are kind of ongoing. So in terms of my own practice, one of the special things that happened while I was up there was meeting this woman called Jill Heather, who's this kind of quirky local art historian that's kind of a bit of a hermit and doesn't really like people. But over the last 15 years, she's been documenting the cemeteries and lonely graves of the 3 shires surrounding Leonora. And I finally convinced her. I kept going to her house and annoying her and talking to her, and she sort of realised after a while that I was going to keep doing that. And in fact, we established this fantastic relationship, and she'd take me out bush and, you know, we'd go out and with the GPS and find these lonely graves, and I took to documenting them, which is the work that's in this show. And for me, the lonely graves symbolised how I was feeling as a person there. A few days after being there, I'd gone kind of walking out on a salt pan, and I distinctly remember looking down at the soil and thinking, that's hard, I can walk across that. And I took one step into it and the mud went up to my knees. And for me, that was like, I don't know this place. I'm so dislocated. Here I am, I'm from Perth. You know, I thought I understood a little bit about the bush and about the landscape, but actually I knew nothing, and I was really aware of that the whole time. And I guess that's what kind of informed the way I engaged with the community was, you know, tell me something that I don't know, you know, and to give people space in order for me to be amazed at all the extraordinary information that they had developed over the years of growing up and living in this place. And it made me think a lot about the early colonial history, which I guess is my broader research interest. And these guys, these settlers that kind of died in these lonely spots looking for gold, you know, in some ways they embody all the amazingness about you know, Australians. You know, we're slightly crazy, we're kind of willing to give it a go, you know, we're pretty tough, you know, it's pretty amazing. But the downside, I guess, is that these people mostly died because they didn't connect to the land and that they didn't access the Aboriginal people. And largely it's a pretty sad story in that community about what went on there in terms of the settler Aboriginal engagement. And so it was almost as if this dialogue, the traces of it were evident everywhere. And so the lonely graves aren't just about the colonial history, they're about the kind of failings of me and, you know, I guess the broader Australian community about knowing how to live in this place. And yeah, and I think I've got to wrap it up now. So I've got 2 more minutes. What you're seeing now is the Gawlia town site, which is I stayed in Hoover House. I don't know whether you know, but J. Edgar Hoover, the former President of America, lived in Leonora for a while and ran the mine. I stayed in his house while I was up there. That's looking down on the mine that he began as I was flying into Leonora for the first time. And so there is incredible... I suppose one of my challenges was really to select a topic to work with. This is one of the lonely graves. So, you know, they died from various things: suicide, TB, drowning in a mine shaft. What was interesting in doing the research with Jill was that there was a lot of energy put into establishing whether they were Aboriginal bones or white bones. And so, you know, even... And the way that they were buried. Some of the graves are Afghani graves, and they were buried facing Mecca, and they didn't have crosses. So there was really kind of, I don't know, this whole kind of genre of cultural labelling that was going on, and that, I don't know, is still going on with the people from the Middle East there in the APOD today. You know, there's been people in the Middle East in that landscape for a long time. So, but I guess in conclusion, when I finally was about to leave there, and I had finally got this bloody Basel residency after applying for this for 11 years, and actually I didn't want to leave Leonora. You know, I'd probably drunk a bit too much wine, but I was at the opening, and I was here with this community, and I really felt like I'd come home. And even though I arrived in Australia when I was 7, I actually realised through being there that this was the first time that I felt that I had been welcomed here by the Aboriginal community, by the people of Leonora, who actually were just sort of like artists in a way, because they're all a bit kooky and, you know, had ended up in a place like Leonora for a range of strange and varied reasons. And so they were very accepting of this weird artist that kept asking strange things, and I stood up and I talked to everyone and thanked them for being there, and I just kind of burst into tears, and I was just standing there sobbing in front of this room of people, and you know, people that know me in Perth would have thought that was really strange, because everyone thinks I'm this really tough kind of, you know, person. But here I was thinking, you know, I don't want to leave here, you know, and has someone got a job for me, because I'll move here if you want me. I'm still waiting for the offer, but maybe they didn't like me that much, I don't know. But you know, anyway, it was more than, for me, it was more than the art that I made. It was much more than the art that I made, and it was, hopefully for them, it was much more. I'm still doing projects and going up there, and it's ongoing, and hopefully it was... you know, as the keynote speaker talked about earlier, in terms of measuring the success of the project for a lot of people, it's hard to look at an artwork in an exhibition and know all of that. Yep. So, thanks.